August 1135. A death rattle echoes through the stone chambers of ruined castle. The air hangs thick with the metallic scent of blood and bile. Henry I of England, the man who once commanded armies across 2 kingdoms, lies crumpled on silk sheets, his intestines poisoned by a meal of lampreys, those ancient, jawless creatures that attach themselves to flesh and drain their hosts from within. An apt metaphor, perhaps, for a life spent consuming what was never his to take. But here is what the medieval history books buried beneath Latin incantations and diplomatic prose. Scattered across England, Normandy, Wales, and beyond, at least 20 children bastards all carried his blood in their veins. 20 souls conceived in darkness, born in secret chambers, raised in the shadows of legitimacy. No English monarch, before or since, would approach this record of biological conquest. This was not merely adultery. This was dynasty building through the bedroom, power politics written in genetic code. Why does this matter now, 9 centuries later? Because every whispered affair, every child hidden from public record, every woman used as a vessel for royal ambition tells us something fundamental about power. Those who wield it have always believed themselves exempt from the rules that govern ordinary mortals. And we, the inheritors of their world, must decide whether to remember them as they wish to be remembered or as they truly were. The year is 1068. William the Conqueror's sword still drips with Anglo-Saxon blood. In the aftermath of the Battle of Hastings, a new world order emerges from the smoke and screams. Into this violent dawn, Henry arrives, the youngest son, the afterthought, the one never meant to rule. While his father carved England into fiefs and his brothers Robert and William Rufus postured for power, young Henry received only money, £5,000 of silver. No land, no future, no throne. But Henry possessed something more dangerous than territory: patience and appetite. He was, according to William of Malmesbury's eyewitness account, a man of medium stature with thinning black hair. His eyes bright, calculating, missed nothing. His chest was broad, his body compact and powerful, yet it was not in personal combat that he excelled. "My mother bore me a general, not a soldier," he would claim, echoing the Roman commander Scipio Africanus. Henry fought with strategy, with manipulation, with the slow accumulation of advantages. He would conquer without bloodshed when possible. When blood became necessary, he spilled it with surgical precision. Between 1087 and 1100, this landless prince moved through the courts of Europe like a predator studying terrain. He learned languages: English, Latin, Norman French, earning the title Beauclerc, the good scholar. But his true education took place in bedchambers rather than libraries. While his brother Robert squandered his duchy on crusades and William Rufus terrorized England with sexual depravity and ecclesiastical theft, Henry quietly assembled something both more subtle and more lasting: a network of women, children, and obligations that would serve as the foundation for his eventual reign. And then, in the year 1100, everything changed. William Rufus died mysteriously, conveniently in a New Forest hunting accident, an arrow through his chest. Robert was away in the Holy Land. Henry, who happened to be present at his brother's death, didn't wait to bury the body. He didn't pause to mourn. He rode directly to Winchester, seized the royal treasury, and had himself crowned king within 3 days. The coup was complete. The afterthought had become the master. But what kind of master would he be? Picture this scene. Abingdon Abbey, circa 1095. A widow named Ansfride arrives seeking justice. Her husband, a tenant of the abbey, has been thrown into prison by King William Rufus. He will die there. She needs help. She needs protection. She needs land. So she visits Henry, the king's younger brother, to seek assistance in her troubles. What happened next is recorded only in fragments, but we know the outcome. Ansfride became Henry's mistress. She bore him at least 3 children: Juliana, born around 1090, Fulk, born 1092, who would become a monk at Abingdon, and Richard of Lincoln, born 1094, destined to drown in the White Ship disaster of 1120. The affair continued for years. When Ansfride finally died in 1164, an astonishing 94 years old, she was buried in the abbey's cloister before the entrance to the monks' church. This was an honor reserved for figures of extraordinary importance, not ordinary widows. Her tomb placement speaks volumes about what she had meant to the king who ruled England. but Ansfride was merely the first name in a catalogue that reads like a medieval census of female vulnerability. Edith Fitz-Fawn. We know almost nothing about her except this. She gave Henry at least one child, possibly more. Her name appears in records like a ghost, substance without story. Sybil Corbet, Lady of Alcester, daughter of Sir Robert Corbet. She was luckier than most, or perhaps more calculating. She bore Henry at least 2 children, including Sibylla, born in the 1092, who would marry Alexander the Fierce, King of Scotland, and Matilda Fitzroy. After her royal service concluded, Sybil secured an honourable marriage to Herbert Fitzherbert, achieving what most royal mistresses never could, respectable redemption. Then there was Guieva de Tracy, whose child's name history lost entirely. Another erasure, another woman reduced to biological function, but of all Henry's conquests, one stands apart in both drama and consequence. Nest Furch, Rhys ap Tudva, Princess of Deheubarth, the woman they called Helen of Wales. The year is 1093. Nest's father, King Rhys, falls in battle near Brecon. Norman invaders flood South Wales like a tide of iron. Nest, her mother, and her brothers are taken hostage. The princess is perhaps 12 years old, a virgin daughter of the last true Welsh king, a prize beyond calculation in the murky world of Anglo-Celtic politics. She is brought to the court of William Rufus. She is beautiful, fatally beautiful. Henry, still a landless prince but already prowling for advantage, notices. What happened between them is depicted in a medieval manuscript now held in the British Library, Henry and Nest embracing, naked except for his crown. This image, raw, explicit, startling, is the first of its kind, a medieval sexualized portrayal of royal power. Around 1103, she bore him a son, Henry Fitzhenry. But Nest was too valuable to remain a mistress. After Henry seized the throne in 1100, he gifted her to Gerald de Windsor, a Norman baron and constable of Pembroke Castle. Political marriage disguised as generosity. Gerald was old enough to be her father. He ruled her father's former kingdom for his Norman conquerors. Yet the marriage was strategically brilliant. It gave Gerald legitimacy with the Welsh people, gave Henry control through proxy, and gave Nest protection. She bore Gerald 4 children, William, Maurice, David, and Angharad. The story should end there. It doesn't. In 1109, Owain ap Cadwagan, a Welsh prince obsessed with Nest's legendary beauty, attacked Gerald's castle at Seanorth Bicon. Gerald barely escaped, fleeing through a latrine shaft. Owain abducted Nest and her children, sparking a conflict that destabilized South Wales for years. When she was eventually recovered, her reputation had transformed from political pawn to Welsh Helen, a woman whose beauty triggered war. After Gerald's death around 1120, Nest took William Haight, Sheriff of Pembroke, as a lover or husband, bearing him another son. Then came Stephen de Moraes, Sheriff of Cardigan, with whom she had Robert Fitzstephen and possibly 2 more sons when she was already in her 40s. By the time Nest died in 1136, she had given birth to at least 9 children, some sources claim 13, by 6 different fathers. Her descendants, particularly through her Fitzgerald sons, would lead the Norman invasion of Ireland. History remembers her as both victim and survivor, captive and queenmaker, a woman who turned circumstances that should have destroyed her into the foundation of a dynasty. She was not alone in this transformation. Isabel de Beaumont, daughter of Henry's chief counsellor Robert, Earl of Meulan and Leicester, also joined the king's bed. Given her father's power and proximity to the throne, this liaison carried different implications, either the king exploiting his minister's daughter or a calculated family offering to secure favor. Either way, it produced children who carried both royal blood and aristocratic legitimacy. These 6 women, Ansfride, Edith, Sybil, Guieva, Nest, and Isabel, represent only those whose names survived. How many others were there, unnamed and uncounted? How many serving women, merchants' daughters, lesser noble women who spent a night or a season in the royal bed and then disappeared back into historical darkness? The medieval historian Orderic Vitalis, writing in the 1132, condemned Henry's pattern. Throughout his life, he was enslaved by the sin of lust and had many sons and daughters by his mistresses. Yet even this censure was buried within longer passages praising Henry's administrative competence. The church shrugged, the nobility looked away, the women themselves had no voice. But here is the remarkable part. Henry acknowledged these children, he claimed them, he used them. Robert of Caen, born to an unknown Norman woman around 1090, became Earl of Gloucester and Henry's most trusted advisor during the civil war that followed his death. When Henry's legitimate son William drowned in the White Ship, Robert nearly became king. Instead, he spent decades fighting to put his half-sister Matilda on the throne, demonstrating loyalty that transcended the accident of his birth. Richard of Lincoln, Ansfride's son, also died in the White Ship, his father's dynastic plans crumbling into the freezing waters of the Channel. Matilda, daughter of Edith, married Conan III, Duke of Brittany, extending Henry's influence into France. Juliana, Ansfride's daughter, married Eustace de Pacy, became embroiled in baronial politics, and according to one account, once attempted to murder her father with a crossbow when he besieged her husband's castle. Her aim was poor. Henry survived. Sibylla married the King of Scotland. Henry Fitzhenry became a military commander. The list continues, each child a thread in a web that stretched across Europe, binding former enemies and dubious allies to Henry's will through the irrefutable logic of shared blood. This was not mere promiscuity. This was statecraft. On the 25th of November 1120, the White Ship departed Barfleur for England. On board was Henry's legitimate heir, William Adelin, along with Richard of Lincoln, Matilda of Perche, and much of the young Anglo-Norman nobility, the next generation of rulers, drunk on wine and immortality. The ship struck a rock. Nearly 300 people drowned in the darkness. Only one survived. When Henry learned his son was dead, chroniclers report that he never smiled again. The machinery of succession so carefully constructed through legitimate and illegitimate channels had catastrophically failed. His queen, Matilda of Scotland, had already died in 1118. His second marriage to Adeliza of Louvain produced no children, despite years of trying. Henry was forced to name his daughter Matilda, widow of the Holy Roman Emperor, as his heir. The barons swore to accept her. They lied. When Henry finally died in 1135, intestines ravaged by poison or lamprey indigestion, the sources differ, England plunged into a civil war called the Anarchy that would last 19 years. His bastards, particularly Robert of Gloucester, would prove more loyal to his memory than the nobility who had sworn oaths. Robert fought for decades to place Empress Matilda on the throne. He failed, but his loyalty illuminated something profound. Legitimacy is a legal fiction, but family is written in blood and bone. Archaeological evidence supports the documentary record. In 1165, Ansfride's tomb in Abingdon Abbey, that prestigious placement before the monk's entrance, was opened. Inside, they found the remains of a woman who had lived into her 90s. She had been buried with honors, typically reserved for abbesses or queens. The abbey that had once employed her husband now revered her memory because she had been the king's mistress. Medieval history is filled with such ironies. Power doesn't merely excuse transgression, it sanctifies it. Walk through Westminster Abbey today. Stand before the tombs of kings. Read the inscriptions celebrating conquest, piety, and legitimate succession. Now ask yourself, what happened to the history that doesn't get carved in stone? Henry, I fathered more children outside marriage than any monarch in English history. 22 acknowledged bastards, a conservative count, perhaps more. These children shaped the political landscape for generations. Their descendants became earls, queens, crusaders, rebels. The Fitzgerald dynasty in Ireland traces its origins to Nest's womb. The Earls of Gloucester, the Dukes of Brittany, the noble houses of Scotland, all carry genetic fragments of Henry's nocturnal conquests. Yet our collective memory sanitizes this reality. We call him Henry Beauclerc, the good scholar, focusing on his literacy and legal reforms. We celebrate his administrative genius, his establishment of the Exchequer, his pacification of England after the chaos of William Rufus. We conveniently forget that his governance included the systematic exploitation of female bodies for dynastic advantage. This forgetting serves a purpose. It allows us to maintain the comfortable myth that power and morality naturally coincide, that those who rule do so through superior virtue rather than superior violence. But medieval history facts destroy this illusion. The past, when examined honestly, reveals that civilization has always been built on invisible labor, the labor of women who bore children in secret, raised them without acknowledgement, and then vanished from record while their sons and daughters climbed to prominence. We cannot prosecute Henry I. He has been dead for 9 centuries. His bones are dust. Justice, in any practical sense, is impossible. But memory is not. Remembering honestly is not. Consider Ansfride, the widow who came seeking help and left with children she would raise in the shadow of a crown she could never wear. Consider Nest, taken as a child from her conquered homeland, passed from royal bed to political marriage to abduction to widowhood, bearing children until her body finally failed. Consider Edith, Gieva, Sybil, Isabel, names attached to stories we can barely reconstruct, women whose lives were instrumentalized and then erased. They were not saints. They were not passive victims. Some clearly maneuvered for advantage. Some may have loved him. Some surely didn't. But all were caught in a system that granted absolute power to one person while denying basic agency to others. Here is what medieval history teaches us. Power structures that benefit from forgetting will always encourage forgetting. The dominant narrative, great kings, noble conquest, legitimate succession, survives because it flatters those in authority. The subordinate narrative, sexual exploitation, political captivity, biological instrumentalization gets buried in footnotes, if mentioned at all. But the subordinate narrative is just as true, perhaps truer, because while Henry's legal reforms and administrative innovations shaped governmental structure, it was these 22 invisible children and their silenced mothers who shaped the genetic and political reality of medieval Britain. Legacy is not just what we build. It is also what we take, what we use, and what we discard. So here, 900 years after Henry's death, we face a choice. We can continue telling the story that makes us comfortable, the story of the scholarly king who pacified England and reformed its government. Or we can tell the complete story, the one that includes Ansfride's tomb, Nest's abduction, the unnamed women and uncounted children, the political marriages that were barely disguised captivity, the 22 bastards who shaped history from its margins. The comfortable story is cleaner. The complete story is truer. And truth, unlike legitimacy, cannot be decreed by kings. It must be excavated from silences, reconstructed from fragments, spoken aloud despite the discomfort it causes. This is what ghosts demand of us, not vengeance, which is impossible across the gulf of centuries, but acknowledgement, not punishment, which death has already delivered, but memory. Not forgetting, which is easier, but the hard work of looking directly at what power does to those it touches. Henry I died believing he had secured his legacy through military conquest, legal reform, and carefully arranged marriages. But his true legacy, the one that endures, is written in the DNA of his scattered children and in the stories of the women whose names we can barely remember. These forgotten people, these marginalized lives, these subordinate narratives, they are the foundation on which his official history rests. The powerful write history, but the powerless live it. And sometimes, if we listen carefully to the silences, if we read the gaps in the official record, if we honor what has been buried, we can hear them speaking still. Not from tombs in Westminster Abbey or entries in genealogical tables, but from the spaces between the words, from the stories that were never supposed to be told. This is how we resist the tyranny of convenient memory. This is how we honor the dead who were never supposed to matter. This is how we ensure that legacy means not just what the powerful intended, but what the powerless endured. 900 years separate us from Henry I. His world is gone. His language is dead. His political concerns have long since dissolved into irrelevance. But the fundamental question his life poses remains urgently contemporary. Who gets remembered, and how, and why? Every time we choose to tell the complete story instead of the comfortable one, we answer that question. Every time we name the unnamed, honor the dishonored, and give voice to the silenced, we participate in an act of historical justice that transcends the limitations of law. This is what medieval history demands of us. Not reverence for the past, but honesty about it. Not worship of power, but clear-eyed assessment of what power does to human beings. Henry, I fathered 22 children he would not legitimize with 6 women he would not marry. Some of those children shaped the future of Europe. All of those women disappeared into the gaps of history. Remember them, not because they were virtuous, not because they were victims, but because they were real, and they mattered. And the world we inherit was built as much through their invisible labor as through the visible conquests of kings. This is the lesson that ghosts teach. Memory is the only justice the dead can receive, and we, the living, are the only ones who can deliver it. The past is not past. It lives in every choice we make about what to remember and what to forget. Choose carefully. The ghosts are watching,